Hello and welcome to another Key Smash Studios video. Today I want to talk about one of the usually underrepresented parts of game design, and that's weather as a visual effect in a game. Typically, sounds and visual effects are really underrepresented in small games or indie games, so I wanted to give a really brief overview of the three main types of weather visual effects that you'll often see in larger AAA games that you yourself can implement into your indie games. The first one is a mechanic-based weather system, something like survival Minecraft where the weather changes to rain and mobs start to spawn, things like that where the weather affects the direct gameplay of a game. Another example of this would be in Conan Exiles or Ark Survival Evolved. These are both games that are survival games, and when you do something like create the rain, which causes the player to not need to drink water because it's raining on them, that type of thing where a built-in mechanic of the game is affected directly by the weather, that is a way that weather can affect a game. And it's not usually a visual effect at that point. It's part of the mechanics of the game, but you have to tie the visual effect into the mechanics of the game. The second main type of weather in video games is an atmospheric-based game. Something like Skyrim or The Division, where you are running around and there's snow falling and it creates this aesthetic that you're really going for in a game. And I say aesthetic meaning like a vibe, a feel of a game. It creates this aesthetic of exploration that you're in a foreign land, and that really creates a sense of immersion for the player. So when they're playing, they really feel like they're exploring, and it's such an underrepresented visual effect that is so underutilized. Simply adding a bit of snow into a mountain area will really help the player visualize that this is a mountain area, this is not a place where they go in real life typically, and that takes your game to the next step. Often little details can be the difference between a good game and a really great game. I want to take some time and analyze a scene that uses this aesthetic style of weather particularly well. And I'm going to use The Division because it is one of my favorite aesthetic games of all time. And we're going to launch right into this scene. As we start, we can see that we're running down a New York street at night. And we see the steam coming off, a little bit of flurries in the air, and the weather here is not, the point is not to be overwhelming. The point is to enforce to the player, hey, something is happening here. So, we get this like first-person shooter action that's happening all throughout the city, but at the same time we have this feeling of like, this is winter, there's cars piled up. It doesn't overwhelm the rest of the aesthetics of the game, right? The bodies, the trash, the crash cars, all of that is still part of this game. But the steam, the light flurries, they really add to the aesthetic, and they create this sense of unfamiliarity with an area that we should be relatively familiar with. The third kind of weather that I would like to talk about is a narrative-based weather. And what I mean by a narrative-based weather is something that has gone on in film and movies for a long time. It actually started back, I think, at Alfred Hitchcock, but don't quote me on that. But they use certain weather systems to create an emotional response within the viewer. Something like rain is going to produce sorrow or a negative emotion, whereas sunshine is supposed to be like rebirth or something like that, and it creates this positive vibe coming out of the movie. So we're going to watch a clip here. I was recently doing a playthrough of The Witcher 3, and I saw this weather narrative-based interaction implemented in full effect. So as I hop into this, just to provide a little bit of backstory, as you're playing through The Witcher and you're getting closer to the climax of this story, the stars start to go away and the sky starts to get darker and you start to get closer and closer to this rain atmosphere. We're going to be dealing with a father who's finding out that his unborn child has turned into a monster. And this is supposed to be a formative moment for this character in the game. It is a sorrowful and a deeply remorseful scene in the game, and as you can see as we run down here and enter the cutscene, the rain is howling, there's lightning in the background, we can see the water effects on the camera. He's admitting that he's done wrong. It's a threshold moment for this character. He is probably going to change from this point going forward, and that allows the user, the player, to understand and feel some remorse for this. I should warn you, this creature's a little gross, so if you're squeamish, I'd look away. But this is the monster that is born of his unborn child, and the player is presented with a decision here. And this decision is based off of an emotional response that they get in part due to the rain and the atmosphere of this entire scene. So, more often than not, the player will choose the good option, and that's influenced psychologically by the rain in the scene and the transformation of the father character that's also in this scene. So, just as a quick run through, we can see that the weather is directly affecting the narrative progress of this story climax. And they use it to a wonderful effect in The Witcher, and they use it a lot in The Witcher. And if you haven't played The Witcher, I'd highly recommend it. It is a great game. And that's the list of the 3 main ways that weather can affect games and game design. Especially as a visual effect, I think it's particularly impactful. So don't hesitate to use it in your games. I hope this has been helpful. If it has, if it's been interesting, please don't hesitate to give us a thumbs up. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. It really does help us out. And hopefully we'll see you next week.